Hi, today we will discuss what is slope, how do we find it for a straight line graph for a curved path. First of all, slope is also known as the gradient. It's the same term. Slope means at an angle, or if something is at an inclination. If a surface is at an angle, it has a slope, which means one end of the surface is at higher level than the other end. Here you can see there are three roofs of three different houses. All the three roofs are at different angles, different inclinations. That means they will have different slopes. The roof C is at the highest angle with the horizontal axis than the roof B and the roof A. Okay, with the angles being alpha, beta, gamma. The formula for slope is the change in vertical direction by the change in horizontal direction. Suppose we have to find the slopes of the three roofs. The slope of A roof will be change in vertical direction. The change in vertical direction is 3 minus 0, which is 3. By change in horizontal direction, the change in horizontal direction is 5 minus 0, which is 5, this way. So this is the slope of A roof. Slope of B roof, 5 by 5, and the slope of C roof will be 7 by 5. C is steeper than B. B is steeper than A. Let's discuss about how do we find the slope of a straight line graph. Straight line graph. Suppose we take a displacement versus time graph, which is x versus t. X is the displacement, t is the time. It's a straight line. Slope is equal to change in vertical direction divided by change in horizontal direction. This delta is a symbol that represents some change. Observe that each and every point on this graph, on this straight line, has a constant slope. Why? Because each and every point is at the same inclination, same angle with the horizontal axis, this angle. It's the same. So how do we find the slope of a straight line graph? Choose any 2 points on the straight line, any 2 points. Why any 2 points? Because all the points have the same slope. So consider we take this point and this point. This gap is the change in the vertical direction, and this gap is the change in the horizontal direction. So the slope of this graph will be delta x by delta t, which means change in displacement over change in time. Now we will know that the change in displacement over time is known as velocity. This means that slope of a displacement time graph gives the value of velocity. So velocity is equal to delta x by delta t. Similarly, if we take the graph of velocity versus time, straight line, it's a straight line graph, so take any 2 points to find the slope, then find the change. This change is a change in the vertical direction and this is a change in the horizontal direction. So slope equals delta v by delta t. This is change in velocity over time, which gives us acceleration. Therefore, the slope of velocity versus time graph gives us the value of acceleration. So A equals delta v by delta t. Therefore, a straight line graph has a constant slope at all points on the curve. So how do we find the slope of a graph, which is a curved graph? Let's see. Suppose this is a graph, y versus x graph. It's a curve. Notice that each and every point on this curve is at a different angle, different inclination with the horizontal axis. This one, smaller angle, larger angle, and it's getting steeper. Therefore, a curved graph does not have a constant slope. Its slope keeps on changing at all the points in the curve. How do we find the slope of a graph which is a curved graph? Let's see. Now here we have to find the slope of every point, because every point has a different slope. So remember, a point on a curve has the same slope as its tangent. Same slope as its tangent. Now what is a tangent? A tangent is a straight line. Suppose this is a curve. This is a point. The tangent to this point will be this. A tangent is a straight line that touches a curve at exactly one point, and that too without crossing it, which means the tangent of this point cannot be like this. It cannot cross the curve, so this will be the tangent at this point, which means that if we find the slope of this tangent, that will be the slope of that point. So if this is y versus x graph, or you can say displacement versus time graph, which is a curve, x versus t graph, and we want to find the slope of this point. So first step is to draw the tangent at this point. This is the tangent, and now find the slope of this tangent. Now the slope is a straight line. We have already done how we can find the slope of a straight line graph. So take any 2 points on this straight line. This is a change in vertical axis, change in horizontal axis. This will be the slope of a curve. Remember, the slope of velocity versus time graph gives the value of acceleration, or the value of acceleration gives the slope of velocity versus time graph. Similarly, the slope of displacement versus time graph gives the value of velocity, or the value of velocity gives the slope of displacement versus time graph. Let's see this through an example. Suppose this is the xt graph, displacement versus time graph. And it's a straight line graph. Now we have to draw the velocity versus time graph and acceleration versus time graph. Let's see. We know that the slope of displacement versus time graph gives us the value of acceleration. Here, the slope of this graph is constant because it's a straight line graph. This means that the velocity will be constant. Constant velocity. So the graph will be a straight line parallel to the horizontal axis. And the slope of velocity versus time graph gives us the value of acceleration. Now this graph has a zero slope, no inclination, so the acceleration will be 0. Another example. In this case, xt graph is a curve, like this. Now here we have to draw VT graph, AT graph. The slope of displacement versus time graph gives the value of acceleration. This graph has an increasing slope. The slope is increasing continuously. That means the velocity, the value of velocity will increase. Increasing velocity, so the graph will be like this, straight line. The slope of velocity versus time graph gives the value of acceleration. Now this graph has a constant slope, which means acceleration will be constant. So in this way we can draw VT graph, AT graph using the XT graph, or the other way. If AT graph is given, we can draw VT graph and the XT graph. Let's see how. Through a problem. The problem is, we throw up a ball in the air. Now when we throw up a ball in the air, we give it some initial velocity, let it be V0. When we throw up a ball in the air, we give it some initial velocity, let that velocity be V0. Now, when we throw a ball in the air, it returns to the ground. It's under constant acceleration due to gravity, which is of the value 9.8 meters per second square. We are assuming the upward direction to be positive and the downward direction to be negative. That means it's under constant acceleration due to gravity, which is minus 9.8 meters per second square, and it's constant, so the graph will be like this. It's a constant acceleration, value minus 9.8. Now we know that the value of acceleration gives the slope of velocity versus time graph. See, acceleration is negative. That means the velocity versus time graph will slope down. So it will start with the velocity V0 and it will slope down. Notice that at this point velocity is 0. We know that the value of velocity gives us the slope for displacement versus time graph. It means at this point, exactly this location, the slope will be 0. We throw up a ball in the air, the velocity versus time graph is sloping down. The value of velocity gives us the slope for displacement versus time graph, so graph will be like this. It starts with a positive slope and then it becomes 0 and then negative slope. So at exactly this location, slope of XT graph is 0. When the ball falls down, it gets faster and faster because there is acceleration due to gravity. It accelerates and it gets faster and faster. That's the reason that the velocity time graph gets steeper and steeper, because the value of the velocity keeps on increasing. Let's summarize what we have learned today. So we have understood that if we have been given the displacement versus time graph, we can plot the velocity versus time graph and the acceleration versus time graph. Or the other way around, if the acceleration versus time graph is given or some information is given, then we can plot displacement versus time graph, velocity versus time graph. Let's summarize what we have learned today. The slope of a graph is a change in the vertical direction by the change in the horizontal direction the slope of xt graph gives the value of velocity, which is delta x by delta t. The slope of vt graph gives the value of acceleration, which is delta v by delta t. Slope of a straight line graph is a constant, whereas slope of a point on a curved graph is same as slope of his painting. That's all for today. If you have any queries, you need help, please comment below. Thank you.